Okay, so picture this. Your car's gone. Stolen, right. But no smashed windows, no hot wiring, just poof, thanks to some seriously tech-savvy criminals.
It's almost like something out of a movie.
Right. Or imagine your smart home, the one that practically does your grocery shopping for you, suddenly becomes a hacker's paradise. Not exactly the future we signed up for.
It's a pretty unsettling thought.
Well, buckle up because this is the reality Marc Goodman lays out in Los Delitos del Futuro, and let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
What makes Goodman's perspective so fascinating is that he's not just some tech doomsayer. He's coming at this with years of experience in law enforcement and cybersecurity.
Exactly. He's seen firsthand how criminals adapt and evolve with technology.
He's been sounding the alarm on this stuff for years, and unfortunately, a lot of his predictions are becoming our reality.
So forget that image of the lone wolf hacker in a dark basement. We're talking about highly organized cybercrime syndicates operating like, I don't know, almost like multinational corporations of crime.
It's a really apt comparison. Goodman actually draws a parallel to those old-school criminals who used to tap phone lines. But instead of phone lines, these guys are tapping into something far more valuable.
Data. That's the new oil, right?
Exactly. And just like oil, it's everywhere. Think about it. We practically give away our digital lives for a free email account or personalized ads.
I remember when Google was just a search engine? Now look at it. It's kind of creepy how much they know about us.
It's like we're unknowingly creating this detailed digital blueprint of ourselves with every online interaction.
Every social media post, every online purchase, even every step tracked by our fitness trackers, it all adds up.
And most of us are completely oblivious to how that data is being collected, analyzed, and potentially exploited.
Goodman uses this example of Bobby Duncan, a college student who joined a private Facebook group for LGBTQ support. She wanted to keep her sexual orientation private from her family, but because of how Facebook groups were structured at the time, her dad got a notification and unintentionally outed her. Just like that.
It's a stark reminder that data collection can have these unintended and often very real consequences. It goes way beyond targeted advertising. We're talking about very personal information being revealed in ways we can't even anticipate.
Okay, so now for the part that's going to make everyone a little uncomfortable. That sense of security you get from antivirus software, those little green lock icons on websites.
Yeah, about that.
Goodman argues that it's a dangerous illusion.
He cites this study by Imperva that found most antivirus software only catches a tiny fraction of new threats. It's like trying to fight a wildfire with a garden hose.
So, are any of us truly safe online?
That's the million-dollar question.
Goodman says we live in a screen-mediated world, which basically means we trust these glowing rectangles to show us reality.
Yeah.
But what if that reality can be manipulated?
And that's where things get really unsettling. He gives some pretty eye-opening examples in the book. Like, did you know that journalists were actually able to spy on stock traders through their Bloomberg terminals?
Talk about insider information.
And then there's the Robin Sage example, where a completely fake online profile fooled even seasoned cybersecurity experts.
It makes you question everything you see online, right?
Yeah.
How much of it is real and how much is fabricated.
And think about how often we blindly trust online reviews, GPS directions, news articles. We're constantly absorbing information from these screens without giving a second thought to the source or the potential for manipulation.
And hold on, because it gets even wilder when you factor in the Internet of Things. Your fridge, your car, your pacemaker. If it's connected to the internet, it's vulnerable.
The Internet of Things, or IoT as it's often called, is expanding at an incredible pace, but the security measures haven't quite caught up.
So it's not even just our personal data at risk anymore. It's our homes, our cars, even our physical safety.
It's a pretty sobering thought. It's like we're handing over the keys to our lives, but instead of a physical key, it's access to our data, our homes, our everything.
And it's not just individual hackers we're talking about. Goodman points to the Mumbai terror attacks, where terrorists used GPS, Google Earth, even BlackBerries to coordinate.
Chilling example of how technology can be weaponized.
Right. And then there's Stuxnet, that whole thing where a computer worm, a piece of software essentially, was used to sabotage Iran's nuclear program.
Talk about a digital weapon with real-world impact. That really puts cyber warfare on the map.
Definitely a game changer. It's like, forget tanks and missiles. Now you can infiltrate entire systems, cause chaos from miles away.
It's a whole new battleground, and I'm not sure we've even scratched the surface of how it'll play out.
It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest. But before we spiral, we haven't even touched on the dark web yet. Goodman takes us down a fascinating and, frankly, terrifying rabbit hole there.
It's like a hidden underbelly of the internet, operating beneath the surface of what we see every day. A place where anonymity reigns and criminal activity thrives.
So like the digital Wild West.
Exactly. You can find anything there: stolen credit cards, fake passports, drugs, weapons.
Mhm.
It's a bit of a free-for-all.
How do you even begin to police something like that?
That's the million-dollar question. Goodman argues that traditional law enforcement tactics are struggling to keep up. It's like trying to catch smoke. It's constantly shifting, evolving.
So what do we do? Throw our hands up in defeat.
Not necessarily. Goodman doesn't advocate for surrender, but he does suggest we need a major rethink. We need to move from a reactive stance on cybersecurity to a proactive one. He actually introduces this concept he calls participatory security.
Participatory security. Now that's a new one for me.
It's a really interesting idea. Essentially, it's the understanding that we can't just rely on tech companies or governments to protect us. We, the everyday users, need to be active participants in our own digital security.
So are you saying we all need to become cybersecurity experts overnight? Because I don't know about that.
Not quite. It's more about adopting a mindset of awareness, like a neighborhood watch program, but for the digital world.
I like that analogy. You don't need to be a police officer to report suspicious activity in your community, right?
Exactly. It's about being observant, noticing things that seem out of place, and sharing that information. Goodman believes we can apply that same principle online.
So it's about leveraging the collective knowledge, the collective awareness of everyone who uses the internet.
Exactly. He gives this compelling example of Millie Dowler, a young girl who went missing in the UK. The police investigation was stalled, but then ordinary citizens, outraged by the case, they started digging into phone records and things like that.
Wait, wasn't that the case where it turned out someone had been accessing her voicemail after she went missing?
Yes. And that discovery, which was made by ordinary people, not law enforcement, blew the lid off this whole scandal about journalists hacking into the phones of celebrities, politicians, even victims of crime. It was a massive abuse of power that was only exposed because of the collective efforts of ordinary people.
That's a powerful example of what Goodman's talking about. What other examples does he give?
He also talks about the expenses scandal in the UK, where a huge leak of government expense reports was made public, and it was citizens who took it upon themselves to go through all that data and expose all sorts of questionable spending by members of parliament.
So it's like crowdsourcing investigative journalism, using the power of the internet and, frankly, collective outrage to hold powerful people accountable.
Precisely. These examples show that when people are motivated, when they feel personally invested, they can achieve extraordinary things.
Okay, but it can't be that simple, right? I mean, not everyone has the skills to go digging around for cybercrime.
You're right, and Goodman acknowledges those challenges. He talks about the need for clear guidelines, ethical considerations, and definitely collaboration with law enforcement. It can't just be a free-for-all.
So no digital vigilantes running amok.
Not exactly. It's about finding that balance, harnessing the collective intelligence of internet users responsibly and effectively.
This is all incredibly interesting, but I imagine some listeners might be feeling a little overwhelmed at this point. It's one thing to talk about the future of crime and how we need to adapt, but what can we actually do? What are some tangible steps people can take?
That's the million-dollar question. And the good news is that Goodman offers some very practical advice in Los Delitos del Futuro.
Okay, let's hear it. What can our listeners do, starting today, to protect themselves in this wild west of cybercrime? So what's the secret formula? How do we stay safe out there?
Well, Goodman starts with the basics, the stuff we've all heard a million times, but let's be honest, we don't always follow. Strong passwords, and I mean like really strong, unique passwords for every single account.
No more password 123.
Yeah.
Definitely not. And this is where those password manager apps come in handy. Remember we were talking about those earlier?
Lifesavers. Seriously. What else?
Be mindful of the data you're sharing online. Every post, every photo, every comment, it all gets added to that digital profile we talked about.
So no more posting those embarrassing party photos.
It's not about going off the grid completely. Just be conscious of what you're putting out there, who can see it, how it might be used.
It's about being deliberate, right? Not just clicking accept on every single thing the internet throws at us.
Exactly. Those terms of service agreements, those app permission requests.
Yeah.
Take a minute to understand what you're agreeing to. Does that flashlight app really need access to your contacts? Probably not.
Good point. I've definitely been guilty of that myself. Anything else we should watch out for? Public Wi-Fi. It's tempting, I get it. Free Wi-Fi is like a siren song.
Oh, totally. But those unsecured networks are risky, right?
Exactly. They can be a hacker's playground. Goodman really recommends using a VPN, especially on public Wi-Fi. It encrypts your internet traffic, makes it much harder for anyone to snoop.
VPNs. Got it. They sound like a worthy investment. What about those phishing scams you hear about all the time?
Those are getting sneakier by the day. These scammers are creating emails and websites that look unbelievably legit, even mimicking well-known companies.
It's scary how convincing they can be.
Right. So always double-check those sender addresses, hover over links before you click, and be super wary of any email asking for personal information out of the blue.
It's like that old stranger danger thing, but for the internet. Don't talk to strangers, and definitely don't give them your passwords.
Exactly. And if something feels off, trust your gut. It's better to be safe than sorry. Contact the organization directly through their official website if you have any doubts.
Solid advice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've covered the individual steps, but Goodman's vision goes beyond that, right? He talks about collective action, working together to create a more secure online world. How do we make that happen?
Well, he talks about supporting organizations that are on the front lines, fighting for digital rights and stronger cybersecurity measures.
So those groups that are advocating for better privacy laws, things like that.
Exactly. They rely on public support, so even a small donation can make a difference. Or volunteer your time, spread the word about their work. It all adds up.
It's about making our voices heard, letting those in power know that we demand better. What about those citizen science projects you mentioned earlier? The ones using crowdsourced data to fight cybercrime.
Right. Goodman highlights some really interesting projects in the book. Participating in those can be a really tangible way to contribute.
I love that idea. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. This deep dive into Goodman's Los Delitos del Futuro has been pretty eye-opening, to say the least. It's amazing and a little terrifying how much the world of crime is changing right before our eyes.
Absolutely. It's a whole new world out there, and the rules are still being written.
But the main takeaway here, and I think Goodman drives this point home really well, is that we're not powerless. We all have a role to play in making the digital world a safer place.
Exactly. By being aware, being proactive, and, most importantly, being engaged, we can make a difference.
So that's a wrap on this deep dive into the future of crime. It's a conversation we'll definitely be revisiting as the digital world continues to evolve. In the meantime, stay safe out there, stay informed, and stay engaged. And if you want to delve even deeper into these topics, we highly recommend checking out Marc Goodman's Los Delitos del Futuro. This is a fascinating, thought-provoking read that will give you a whole new perspective on the challenges and, yes, even the opportunities of this digital age we're living in.